GSA contact website or GSA website contact. Anytime you start up any of these softwares that we cover in my videos, always right click on them and select to start them in administrator mode. Now, as you can see, it loaded up, and when GSA has an update, it will show us here in the bottom. We'll run it. Now, just to be aware, sometimes there's a little issue. This update just came out on some of my other systems. It's just not taking, and it falls back to the original, but these guys keep their stuff up to date pretty frequently, and these issues tend to get worked out pretty quick. I never contact them. I just roll with it. So let's get through our update real quick here. I'm going to pause the video, and then we'll come back. Okay, we have successfully updated. So let's talk about what's going to be involved to make this run. So for GSA website contact, of course, I'll always be running a VPN in the background from any system that I'm running, just to guard my own personal fixed IP address. And one of the questions that came up in my last video was about using multiple captchas. You always want to use 2 captcha softwares. So in this case, of course, we're going to be running GSA Captcha Breaker, and I already updated this before the video. Let's give it a second here, a little delay of game. Boom, there we go. So now we've got this. Now the next piece we're going to need is Xevil. And I do not see my authorization on the desktop, so let me just pause the video a second. Okay, I've got the authorization shortcut here. This actually doesn't actually have to be run as administrator, but just out of habit, I do it across the board. This launches the authorization app. And this is necessary if you're running Xevil without Xrumor. When you use Xrumor, which is a forum posting software, the licensing sign-on happens there. And you can see I have 4 other copies licensed because currently I'm running 4 copies of GSA content, website contact on other systems, and we're going to take a look at one of those because I'm having a little problem, and I think this is a good time to sort of not only cover this software as I indicated I wanted to, but to also take you through, you know, what happens in the real world when you run into problems. And now that we've got that licensing going, we can minimize this, and then we'll right click on our Xevil and select Run as Administrator. And so at the end of the day, these are the 3 things we're going to need. Now, here's what happens. 1 or more components are missing or damaged. So let's stop this, because every time you're going to run on a system with this and you have antivirus, because I'm not running from a VPS desktop, these are my own in-office systems, what happens here is what we want to do for the time being is to turn our real-time scanning off. And I'll just set it to when I restart my PC, turn off. Then what we want to do is go to our quarantine items, and we'll see. Let's restore that. It was already deleted on an earlier date, so that doesn't matter. And now we can start our Xevil, run as administrator. You'll always get this the first time before you actually run. This message will not appear. 1 or more components still damaged. Current port is open. System host file is incorrect, and that's okay. But why are we seeing deleted by antivirus? So let's take another look. I'll check it again. Maybe it wants that other one. And these are just some of these little issues that come up in the course of running and setup. And, you know, as a rule, you'll start to realize this system that I'm recording on, this is just for demonstration purposes. But when I go to the quarantine, let's just put this one back. Okay, and we should be okay now, hopefully. And let's try it again. Authorization successful. And system host file incorrect. Now, don't get hung up on that. That's not going to prevent you from running. Let's get through the course of the setup, the basics. Now, what I did here is I imported a campaign from one of my other systems that's actually currently running right now. And I generally do these in increments of 50,000 or 100,000. 100,000 will generally take about 3 days to get through, running consecutively. So what we want to do is take a look at the options here when we go to set up a campaign. Because whether you start with a new one or we go through an existing one, it's not going to really change anything. But the way you're going to take a look at that is by going here. Now, we're not scraping, so these settings aren't going to matter. I'm working off of a list, okay, that I purchased from another source, and so we can bypass these things for the moment. When you're working with a list, this is your main, interruption on Skype. Sorry about that interruption, everyone. A new client, and we're just seeing some early results. I might highlight that in my next video, which I want to cover about SEO and how the backlinking approach relates to that. But in this video, let me just point out this right here. System, the host file is incorrect. That does not prevent you from running, but I want you to remember that as we get to the issues that I'm having currently with the systems. So, now here's my campaign. Let's go back to the project settings. We're not scraping, we're using a list. But if we were actually scraping, we'd want to fill this with a list of keywords for it to search and scrape. And we'd want to configure proxies. And it's the same standard proxy setup that you would find in your other GSA products that have the built-in proxies. So you either have to set this up to scrape proxies, search. I generally like to do this at sometimes 500, check public proxies. That's really all there is to this to get this going. Or better yet is if you can add proxies, paid proxies that you put in. Filter, not a lot here to really talk about unless you need to remove as you get deep into doing campaigns. You've had people request not to include them in those campaigns. You can keep a running list and add it in here. This you want to just go with all of the defaults because this is looking for the variations of the word contact form, etc. because ultimately that's what it's attempting to find. And here's where we're going to get into the meat. This is what is going to construct your actual post. And all of these defaults that it has set up to create random phone numbers and emails are fine. There's only two fields we're going to concentrate on, and that is the subject, okay? And this is a copy of a campaign that I'm doing for one of my own websites. And you see here, by putting domain in between two percentage marks, that will automatically take the domain of the current contact form that it's trying to fill out and insert it into the subject line. So just adds a little bit more of a, individualized to the end user that you're filling out the contact form. And then, of course, there's the message. The key thing to point out in this message is you're going to use a bit.ly short link. And that bit.ly short link redirects to my web property. Now, that being said, just a little quick tip to understand. When you're promoting your own web property and your whatever your site is, .com, you're going to have trouble using email under that domain name because you're going to get some blacklisting from these posts. There are going to be complaints. So my suggestion is get an alternate version of your domain name to handle your email. In my case, I have the same domain name, but instead of .com extension, I use .email, and that handles all of the email accounts utilized for the individuals working my property, myself, and even for the automation with the contact forms, etc. So something to kind of keep in mind, one of those little catch-alls, because with this product, one of the best things you're going to do is promote your own things rather than affiliate things. Things that you promote to websites through contact forms, they really need a little more, has to be something that they need, that is going to be useful to them, like SEO services is probably in some form or another the top thing that they're going to have interest in. There are other things that people do market successfully, but as I said in my previous video, you're not going to be filling out these forms with diet pills or some other, health related or some, off market thing to contact forms, because that's not going to work here. And you're just going to wind up getting a lot of complaints and blacklistings, and so you want to try to keep all of that to a minimum. But in those two fields, that's all we really got to worry about here to get started. Now, we're going to go to our captchas. And so you see here, we are configured to go to GSA. I have it set to 1. A lot of times, I really just set this to 0. But I'll explain later as it relates to some of my other problems. As we get here to XEvil, this is, again, got a little bit more. We're just saying we're using the GSA API key, simulate host in HTTP header, and one try to resolve. Okay? So this process in this scenario is being handled from the content software. Now, if I don't have to add XEvil here, I could go into here, and as you see, I've got it configured here and handle it from here. So, but it's not, if I'm setting up from the contact website software, I don't need to configure this in here. I only need to, if I want to just pass it from GSA to website contact to the capture breaker, then here, when this one fails, it will go to XEvil. And that is what we basically want. And why do we use 2 capture breakers? I would use 3 if I could do it successfully, and I have used 3. But you can't chain them in this fashion. If you wanted to actually say use 3, the best way you would really want to do that is it has to happen from the GSA product, either here, or it's got to happen from here, from the settings in here, passing it from this to the next softwares. But you're not going to be able to chain it in the sense that if you use a third product like Capture Sniper, it'll go to here. It's got to have to be controlled from one of the GSA products. And you can see here, when I go to project settings, we go to captures, down here, you can select use capture services in random order or else top to bottom, because if the top one doesn't get it, it's going to go to the next one to verify it. Once, it's not going to go to XEvil if this one solves it and we trigger that the message was sent successfully down here. Now the other thing to look at here is project settings, captures, scheduler. Unless you really have to control your scheduling for certain things and what times you want to run it, you want to turn it off for certain periods of time. It's just not very complicated to figure out. You set your start time and finish time, some notes about your campaign. But in truth, if you're purchasing a list, there's a very fast track to set up. So it's very important just to understand and recognize that you can't, XEvil is not going to pass, if it fails, it's not going to pass the request off to the next software. It has to be managed from one of the GSA products. Okay? So just so you understand that. Now, why do we use more than one? It's because you're not going to be able to cover every type of capture with one. And when we get down here to XEvil, oh, this is not what I wanted. Let's take a look. We're going to look at our settings here. And generally, I found it's recommended to put this on root capture. Okay? We're going to be getting most of our 2 capture type styles like this out of our GSA. So here, what we want to do is we want to broaden our ability to reach more types of capture services. And that's why. And each software is a little different. Some are better at just handling certain things than other ones. So if it fails on one, we want to push it to the next and to the next. But we can't chain them except from the GSA products. So that's where we really want to manage that from. Whether it's all from this one or it's just passed to this one, and from this we have all the same options when we want to add capture services. You'll see it's the same list, and they have everything, and they've got Cap Monster, which is another product I've been testing on one of the systems. Okay, interruption. Now, sorry about the interruptions. Generally, I do these videos very early hours of the morning before the phones start to ring or Skype goes off, and it's close to noon here, so got a lot of communication things flying. So that being said, let's just come back here for a second, because now we've got a campaign, and in here I've already loaded the URLs. They got carried over with the backup. But what I would do if I was going to import, I would just go to my file here, and where I'm keeping my list, and I'm running off of a world list that I have taken that list that it basically has about 1 million in it, and I use Scrapebox to divide the list up into 100,000 increments. So this is February's list from the world, list number 4. Okay, but if I wanted to add this one, I will just select it. We give it a second. It will confirm that that is added, imported 100,000 URLs, and now you see my number has climbed. But I won't be running that on this system. This is just for demo purposes. That being said, we can rename the project, delete a project. You can duplicate a project for future use. So let me just cover that real quick, because what you want to do when you duplicate a project is remove these, then click yes. So everything stays the same, but we're clean now, no lists. Now I can just rename this, and I can prepare it for my next list, which would be number 5. Okay, and then what I would do is just come in here, import list number 5, and that's how I would keep track. I also keep a spreadsheet of all the campaigns I run, and on that spreadsheet I list the name of the campaign, I have the short link, I list what system I'm running it on, I even what list of proxies I may be using, and how big the list is, etc., etc., just so I keep track, because when you have as many systems as I do, it doesn't take long before you get lost. Now, once I've got that and I've got the list, we're basically ready to run right now. Okay, but that would require but Xevil requires proxies of its own to run. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. When we click this is the process window. It's actually going to show us how we want to, where we're going to configure our proxies. So we would select a proxy type like HTTP list. Generally I run this at 100 or 150. I leave the timeouts the same. This is not a real list. It won't do you any good. It's just a default setting that comes in the thing, and I keep, let's see, do I have it on here? No, I don't. Let me stop for a second and import a proxy list. But all you have to do is take your list of proxy IPs and import it into there. But let's take a look at that on a live system in a minute. Now, before we take a look at a live system that's running, let's take a look at Xevil here. And you see what's happened? System host, file host is correct. That straightened itself out. Now, I would prefer at this point that was not showing green. And here's why. I have had no issues running Xevil for several months until I noticed that system host file is correct. So now let's take a look at a live system that's running. Currently, I have 4 systems running campaigns with lists. And I spent the weekend trying to figure out what my problem was. Because if we go here to the root capture and I select my HTTP list, let me select my full list here, and it will automatically switch. Now, bad site key, that's going to happen from time to time. It's like there's not a match or they have something blocking. But it's the IP band, because right now I've been running without the proxies temporarily and simply relying on my VPN. So let's give it a second as it starts. Oh, IP banned. Look at that. Is that actually kicking in? Well, this is unexpected, but let's just stop this here because this was sort of a problem-solving thing, and sometimes with Xevil we need to restart it after changing a setting, although I found that generally that isn't the case. I could just switch it up in real time. So I'm going to run it as administrator here. I'm going to Well, I accidentally stopped it, so now we have to go back to send message instead of restarting the highlighted thing. So what we want to do when this starts back up, it says, do you want to use only the selected URLs from the listed? Say no. If you say yes, it's going to just give the selected URLs that are finished and the campaign is over. You want it to continue. So it's a little confusing. Always select no if you fully stop something. Now while this is starting again, let's look at what's going on here and give it a second. Oh, authorization failed. Okay, so we got something else going on. And let's do a little bit of live troubleshooting. Let's come back here. Pause highlighted project. Authorization failed. Why is our authorization failed? While we're up here, let me go back to my main desktop here and let me just kill this because we're not really running it. I actually have 2 licenses. Lets me run 5 copies, 2 business licenses. But let's just come back here. Let's get that Xevil started right. Because these are some of the things that are going to happen sometimes. One more component's missing or damaged. So now we got to go back, and you see what happens is I don't always set it to reboot the system. You're usually fine if you just tell it 15 minutes. It will ignore the file. And I have, under my real-time scanning, I tell it files to ignore. But it's still, when they trigger, it will go off. So better to just put it out when I restart my PC. Go back to our quarantine items. We just restore that. We're good to go. And now I should be able to start back up. Authorization successful. Now let's see what happens. Resume highlighted projects. And let's see what happens in here. Because I was actually receiving proxy errors using my IPv6 proxies that I purchased from Cold Proxies. For $70 a month, they give you 1,500. Now, let's see if it's going to fail. We give it a few seconds. It starts processing. And I want you to actually see the error that is occurring here. And I expect we're going to get it because I kind of have a sense of a feel for these things. Otherwise, we would have seen something saying okay by now, and that's because it's retrying, doesn't realize there's an issue. And this is a game of patience, like anything. Learning these softwares, mastering them, staying on top of them, watching the results, checking them frequently till you find the comfort zone. I spent the better part of my weekend with little sleep working on these systems, trying to resolve these issues. Yet here we are, and I'm still not seeing anything. But I'm expecting the proxy error. There it goes. Okay? So now, what I do is I'm running no proxy. And without any proxy, it's going to fall back and just go on my VPN. And so as a result, as a short-term workaround, see, now they're going in okay. and they'll go okay, and then I'll start to see banned IP, maybe a half hour, an hour, and what I'll do is I'll just select a different location, and then it'll clear up for a while. Now for me right now, this is okay, even though I'm not getting a highest success rate. I'm probably doing, as you can see here, this particular list at 100,000 sites, I've had 51 successfully sent, 26,000 failed. That means I'm getting a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 successful posts to 1 failure. That's not where I want to be. Generally, it's 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 when you're successfully running with a proxy list. But that's not the case here. But I'm not concerned because these are old lists. They go back from February. I've already got March. I'll have new lists in another week. So until I get my issue worked out, this is just a little short-term workaround. And I'm just checking the systems every half hour, an hour, and just switching the IP address. Not the optimal way to do it. But in this world, when you're having issues, you got to figure it out. Now, what was my issue? Because on these systems, let's take a look at how these lists look. You see my IPs here. This is not, this is the wrong one. But these will all be changed. I have IP, it shows the port, the password, and the username and password for authorization. There's all different ways to authorize IP addresses. So let's just kind of take a look at that very quickly about how the IP address is format. Because, in fact, without having to put you into my system, and this will all be changed before I post the video anyway because I reset these already. But basically with Coldfire, you can export your list just with this. Initially, I was just running IP and port. Then they have an interface where you can list your current IP address, which means you can get your current IP address and add it to their system to authenticate the IP and port. But you don't need that if you're using username and password. And these can come in different formats. It should be, for Xevil, any format should work. There's no setting in Xevil for the format. It accepts it in whatever format you give it. Sometimes the username and password is first and then the IP and the port. But I'm getting proxy errors. So I went through every possible scenario. And so as a result, what I did is I tried another company. And let's just take a look at those 2 companies that I'm using currently. Now, until this morning, I was only using 2 proxy services. Storm proxies I use for my IP4, which are more expensive. I only have 30. I have 2 lists, 20 and 10. And those are for things that you need those types of IP addresses for, like Ranker X or SEO Autopilot, or I add them into GSA when I want to supplement my scraping process for free proxies, okay? But that's not going to be sufficient number for running something like Xevil. So that's when you want to go to something like Cold Proxy, where they'll give you 1,500 IP6 proxies, IPv6 proxies, for $70, which is really good. And they have some nice features about rotating and rebooting. And I thought the issue might have been with their proxies that were causing the proxy errors. So this morning, I took Proxy Seller for a drive and I purchased 500 proxies for a month for $40. And I tested them, but unfortunately, I got the same proxy error. However, that gave me a clue. And look, see, I'm seeing IP banned, IP banned. New York isn't one of the best areas to come out of, so it's nice if I can get into, and I probably could even go into another country. Let's just take a crack at that and see how that works. But generally, I've been just popping around the various locations in the U.S. Probably I should pick more European ones because this is actually a world list that I'm running, and the world list is basically means non-USA, anything, and USA is done separate, and you see, now we're starting to see okay, and we'll be good for a while. So this is just my sort of workaround, you know, but this is like on the third day, so things, by now, as we're getting close to the end of these lists, things are getting more strained. So I have to be a little more on top of things. Whereas when I first started over the weekend, it was quieter. I had nice long periods of several hours before I would have to change the IP address. But this is not the recommended approach. So one thing I wanted to point out, that the one difference that I noticed throughout all these settings is that when I ran the Xevil over here, and we had that connect to host file was okayed, well, that's the one key difference that I could see about this in the settings. Of course, we don't see that now because under the monitoring, it starts passing the captchas. So we'll generally see the same, a lot of times the same captcha up here, and then it got passed to down here. And in any case, but normally it would have just been as simple as, you know, picking your proxy type and just mapping it to the list, and that's all there is to it. Not a lot. I'm not going to cover all of the captcha things. I think that we're going to have to do maybe a separate video on there, but you'll see that I generally like to keep these off. I don't know why this is on. Let me just, I'm going to be going through some things, and hopefully before I get the next video off, I'll jump back into this and tell you how I solved the problem or what the setting was. But at this point, I'm going to contact Botmaster Labs because the weekend's over and I have a tremendous amount of work going on in the office. So unfortunately, you know, I've got to problem solve these things along the way, and that is part of the game with this. When you want to get into these softwares, sometimes you sit down. This GSA contact software, very easy and fast to get started with. You purchase this, you purchase the captcha breaker, and whether you use Xevil or Captcha Sniper or Cap Monster, you're going to be okay. Cap Monster's got a few extra hoops to jump through. I like Captcha Sniper. I purchased 2 licenses last August, and I didn't actually license them till a few months later. I haven't gotten a response from them. Each one, the license is synced to the installation. It gives you a key. You have to send them the key. Then they give you the key based back from that key, and you enter it into that system. They haven't responded. I'm reluctant to buy another license and see if I can get them to respond that way when they see an actual purchase, because I don't know what happened, but they still seem to be an active, you know, product. And I really like them as a secondary captcha. But I also love Xevil. I get a very, very high success rate between using GSA Captcha Breaker with Xevil. I'll get like a 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 success rate with the list that I purchased. Now let me just sort of re-emphasize about these lists. When you purchase a list from a third party, you're not going to be putting your average affiliate things that may pertain to website owners in here, even if it's SEO related, or, you know, most of the things on ClickBank and Digistore 24, you're going to find that a lot of that stuff is burned out. And while you may have success, your better approach is going to be to try to find something that everyone else is not really, you know, not a high priority, a high profile product that a lot of the guys who are utilizing these softwares are going to do. That being said, if you are going to do those products, I would suggest that you do not use purchase list, but rather go to the option of, let's start the GSA back up here, and let's go to the option of scraping our own sites. Now, when you scrape your own sites, you may have an affiliate product that now is no longer of general need to any website developer or for SEO purposes or something along that lines, but rather to the genre of their website. So let's say you've got something affiliate that you know that only a certain type of website is going to be interested in. In that case, that's when we're going to want to go into our project settings here and put the keywords in here. This is where you want to get your keyword research, because you can just, import a file full of keywords, and what this is going to do is go out and scrape those words, the websites for those words, and find those contact forms. So, for example, let's say you've got something that's really good for dentists or certain type of a very specific field that website represents. That's when you want to get into scraping, where you can really target the exact genre for the service or product that you want to affiliate them with. So that's when this is going to work really good. But when you do, you're going to need proxies for this. So you're going to have to configure, and you can see, since I said that before, in the background, it's doing its thing, and it's collecting various proxies that it's going to use. But again, this is someplace where I'm going to, a lot of times, add additional proxies to get them to, I forget off the top of my head, but we can, add, we'll have to select private proxies, and then we'll have to actually add them in here. So, that being said, because now you're going to Google and other sources, and you really want to make sure that and these are just like, you'll see this just like in the regular GSA product for posting. You have all these sources that you can hit, that if you really wanted to go there, but you're going to need proxies for that. A lot of scraping. And generally what I would recommend is you actually do your scraping separately from your posting. But that really all depends, Sometimes you can get a good level of scraping and just do your posting and do the whole thing in one process. That's a little bit more advanced, and you're going to have to tinker around. But understand, solving these problems, just like I'm having with the proxy error. I know that my proxy's checked out, and in fact, this company has tools here, a proxy check. And I was able to take my list of proxies from Cold Proxy, paste them in here, and it did a test, and they all checked out okay. Nothing wrong with my proxies, nothing wrong with the proxies from Proxy Seller. But I can't, whatever's happening, the issue's something that I'm overlooking in the settings. And just only because at the start of the video, I noted that setting in Xevil, and let's just see if we can start that up here again real quick. Let me close that out. Go back to the Xevil, because I want you to actually, let's give that a second to authorize. And I will probably do a little video on the whole Xrumor, Xevil install, how to get all their products in. It's not hard, but it's a little confusing in the beginning, and that's really a separate video. But as I get here to this and we start it up, authorization. This system host file is correct. Up until recently, I never had that. My system host file was showing as incorrect, and I never had an issue. So recognizing that something has changed, and this software does not self-update. It only has to be manually updated. So something has changed, and in that change, somewhere may lie the answer to what's making my proxies not work right. The settings on these, they're pretty basic, but I'm going to do a whole video on the whole aspect and cover this in more detail under the whole Xrumor umbrella, because this is made by Botmaster Labs, but it's very popular to use it without Xrumor. So that being said, let's just kind of get out of there, and then I'll just follow up on this with you on how I get this resolved. As now that I know that it's not the proxies and something else, I'm going to have to get back in here, and we can see I'm still getting a lot of banned things, and I have more than one proxy service, but London didn't help me out that much. Maybe let's try the Docklands in the UK and see if something else better happens. So it all depends. The larger the city, oftentimes there's the less likelihood that you get banned quicker, because they've got a larger pool of addresses that are being distributed in the city. So like I do really well with like Los Angeles and San Francisco, and even generally New York. But you're going to reach a limit that even when you're changing in and out in between I'm basically contaminating their IP pools short term, because they will get, those IP addresses will get blacklisted for other users and potentially cause minor issues even when they go to fill out contact forms on other websites, because the IP address got blacklisted. However, those blacklistings, they're very short term. They last 24 to 36 hours because the IP addresses are listed as dynamic and not static. So dynamic IP addresses that change frequently or are reassigned to people frequently, the penalties are brief. Static IP addresses are another matter. And of course, my entire office is running on a single static IP address. So I go to great lengths to keep myself and my personal IP address, concealed, which is why I am, regardless of whatever proxies that I'm using, I am always running a VPN. That is to ultimately protect my internet connection. Now, why am I showing you my problems? Because these are some of the things that are going to happen. Now, to be frank, I've never had a problem with proxies ever until recently. Something's happened. So getting to the source of that problem takes a little time. I've had to go on their websites, look at their documentations, and of course, they're not all created equal. If we take a look at the dedicated proxies, say, versus cold proxies, IPv6, in here, they provide you with the means to change your username and password that you want to associate for authenticating those IP addresses and the ports. You can also rotate them every 15 minutes or different lengths of times. They have an auto rotate feature. And what that really does is just rotates the ports, because the port associated with the proxy address is where the ban actually happens. So they have some really nice tools as they've just offered this rotating and rebooting, and they also have IP address authentication from your own system. So a lot of nice extra options. I really recommend Cold Proxy. I don't affiliate. I'm not getting anything for saying that, just to be, clear. Proxy Checker, after looking at a lot of other services, also looks like a nice product as well. Not as many change-up options, but you can buy proxies just for a week here if you want, or 2 weeks. And that can be a nice option if you don't always run campaigns consistently. If this is a part-time thing for you at home, you don't want to pay for something you're not using all the time. You want to measure your cost effectiveness. You're only going to be running campaigns this week. You can just purchase the proxies you need for the week. It's very cost effective. I recommend you check them out. That being said, on my comments in the videos, we've had quite a few things. So what I want to do is, with this issue that I'm covering, I'm going to do a short video on how to install the Botmaster Lab products, which is the X-Rumor for posting to the forums, their authentication. They also have another app called Hrefs, which helps you refine which sites that you're going to post, or actually which forums, based on the keywords that you're going to enter. Because obviously, that's a different type of way to utilize the software, say for affiliate marketing. Perhaps you're doing pet products or something, and there's lots of forums that people are talking about their pets or solutions and things like that. You can configure that to just target those resources. And so that's where that comes in useful. And then, of course, Xevil, because Xevil is one of the best capture breaking softwares out there, and you don't have to use it with their products. Almost every product that can use a capture service lists Xevil. It's amongst the most popular, and it's one of the most best viable solutions out there. It has a very high success rate, and it's got some good configuring options. So I'll cover all of that. That's not going to be a long video, and we'll talk a little bit more about how I get to the solution with solving this proxy error. That being said, someone else asked me about recommended certain affiliate sources. And that's really sort of the $68,000 question. What is the right affiliate source? I spend a lot of time just sitting down with a tablet and hunting things down, looking for something that the light bulb goes off. Here's a really good thing that I can possibly promote just to a certain genre. And when you get that, that's where you want to get into, configuring these with scraping and target certain types of sites. But like with all of my tutorials, I try to, at this stage, keep them quick start guides. So if this is your, you think that this is a good potential for you using GSA website contact, and this is a great thing to start with if you're going to go that road. But you're going to need either a dedicated system to run this on, because it's going to run for days, and you're going to want to running it all the time, 24/7. So you're going to need proxies. You're going to need GSA website contact. You're going to need the GSA capture breaker and at least one other capture software. And there are many, so you're not necessarily limited to the ones that I'm recommending or that I use. There are other ones out there that are decent. So, but I don't try them all. I look for a good success factor. XEvil, one thing I like about XEvil, for the cost of it, you might as well just buy a business license, which allows you to use 5 copies of all of their softwares. But if you're, even 5 copies of just being able to use XEvil for its capture breaking service is worth the business license purchase. I have 2 of them so that I can run as many as 10 copies of XEvil, whether I'm running it with XRumor, GSA Search Engine Ranker, or likewise. But again, when you get into and SEO Autopilot also allows you to use XEvil. It's the one product that you can use outside of having to use a third-party API service, because there's no other software you can configure to use with your SEO Autopilot. Now, up until this point, we are basically set and ready to go. If I were to start this, I'm going to go up to the Start button. And here, this is where we're going to see, with a list, once I'm configured the way I'm set up, all I have to do is hit Send Message. Now, the other main thing is, if you're just going to scrape because you want to gather the URL, you can scrape for new websites, you can scrape and check, and you can scrape, check, and send, do all. You're doing it all in one process, okay? So, my recommendation is that if you're going to scrape your own sites and try to do some targeted niche, that you get a copy of this and you tinker around a little bit. Do short runs and refine your keywords and find your best approaches to make that work. Because as I said, this is not like other types of softwares that we cover in this channel, that this just fills out contact forms. And so that's either, if you're going to use someone else's list, you better be sure that no one else is using it.